I'm standing in the middle of the engine bay as this is my next task. Just strip everything that you can see here out of the way, so I'm just left with a bare frame and an exposed bulkhead. I'm going to start with the easy parts like the battery and a few brackets and things that I can disassemble quite easily, but I've got to be very careful with fixings so that I know which ones go where, crucially, but of course which ones need replating or which ones need replacing, so I've got a reference. So there's an awful lot to do, but as long as I do it carefully and methodically, it should be okay. I'm going to start by taking a load of photos. You can't have enough of a visual reference, and it's only going to be in this condition once. Obviously the car's been restored at some point in the past, but the last thing you need really is getting confused as to what goes where and what something should look like. So there's plenty here that I'm not entirely familiar with yet, but I need to make sure that the fluid connections, the electrical connections, the mechanical connections all go back in the right place. As I said, I'm going to start fairly easy, so get the battery out here, just a question of getting these wing nuts either side of this bracket off, and hopefully it should lift out okay. Note there's actually some rubber stuck under here. I think someone's just done that to try and make it a little bit more secure. You can see here that this just simply hooks around this hole in the panel, and that's what holds the battery in. There's a little bracket on the other side as well for the other one. And there's the remains of a plastic battery tray in here, which has definitely seen better days. The positive cable from the battery goes to another connection that sends a big cable that runs all the way around to the starter motor. So I'll just disconnect this short one here for the battery. And then the earth here with this isolator, which is a good thing to have actually, because it means that you can disconnect the battery really easily. That goes onto the bulkhead just here. Okay, there's something spinning there. I need to get at it from the other side. So it's actually this nut here on the bulkhead, right at the end of the footwell in the passenger side, that I need to get this ring spanner on here, and hopefully that's going to be enough for me to undo it from the other side, because I don't have long enough arms to be able to reach around. Okay, well, with rusty fixing removed, let's get the battery earth off. My next relatively easy win is the dampers on either side. So those are just attached on the suspension here into the top of the frame. So 2 bolts and it should be out. But I need to start by taking the pin out of this castellated nut on the top. It's been in there a long time. Why would it want to come out? Now sharpened a nail to try and get in here. There we go. So I'll just drift out the rest of this lower mounting bolt. Next I'm going to take out the anti-roll bar, so that's the drop link there, the anti-roll bar that's got the bushes that bolt onto the frame at the front here. The other side is already disconnected and I can't even remember doing that myself. So there's not much clearance in around here because of where this is in the wishbone. So I can just keep this adjustable in place. There we go, good. This side is already disconnected anyway, but may as well remove it at the same time. The bottom part of the anti-roll bar bracket is held in with a bolt that goes all the way through the front frame here. So I'm just putting this 1/2 inch spanner on the end there so I can get the socket on there and stop it spinning. Okay, so that's that one undone. Then the top one's a shorter one that goes through here. Let's get this spanner back on it. Hopefully I can get the socket through the gap underneath the brake pipe here. Okay, that's good. There's the top bolt. Lots of corrosion in there. Okay, so that's the bracket that clamps the anti-roll bar bush in place onto the frame. Bolt out, it will all separate. There we go. Right, so I can now lift out the anti-roll bar and the drop link is still attached this side, which I'll then separate. There's the back plate, the anti-roll bar goes on there, one bush. And there's a spacer here which is absolutely full of aluminium corrosion. So the other side looks a bit more intact. There. I'm going to remove the pair of horns next so we can see them mounted either side onto brackets onto the front frame here. Now to remove each of these brackets that holds the horn onto the frame. There we go. It should all clean up absolutely fine, be ready to go back on again, even though it looks awful at the moment. So this one here's got this three-way splitter for the brakes, so undo that. There's a spacer in there for the long bolt that goes through there. Push this bolt back through and capture the spacer in there for the moment until I take the brake pipes apart. Next I'm going to take the steering rack off. So I've got a steering column that comes down here. There's a universal joint that goes into a spline connection there. So I need to disconnect that at the last minute. There's a bracket that attaches it onto the frame here. And of course I need to break both of these ball joints at each of the track rod ends as well. Right, now to use my ball joint splitter. First of all I'll give the edge of the arm here a good tap to try and help break the taper. And that's a question of getting this in there. at the right position and tightening it up. There we go. I think that's good. There we go. Good. We're going to start off by undoing this clamp that goes onto the spline shaft and the steering column so that it can all withdraw easily once separated. I've put some WD-40 in there already. So, okay, there we go. Now I've got 8 nuts and bolts, 4 each side, just behind the gaiter on the steering rack here. Important to note that there's a spacer on the shank of the bolt here because there's a gap between the actual frame and the plate that this mounts on. In this next one here, the Jubilee clip is completely in the way, so I'll undo this and rotate it around and see if that just gives me the clearance I need to get into the nut. Get on there. Right, now these two underneath. So the second one again is a stud off the metallastic bush. This one goes right through the frame to the other side. Like the one up the top, there's a spacer there on the shank of the bolt. It looks like the steering rack's been mounted incorrectly on this side. I'll have to look that up because there's the sign of a washer, a large washer that was used here. But at the moment, there's nothing holding it in here, so it's just 2 nuts this side, 2 half-inch nuts this side. Whereas it did have 4 on the other side. That doesn't look quite right. Well, let's see if I can get the steering rack out now. I just realised that I really shouldn't rush to take the spline shaft out of here without actually marking where they should align. But if I just give this a good clean up, then I can actually mark each part so that I can then put them back together again the same way they came apart. I'll just use this centre punch here and try and get the right alignment between one and the other. I need to remove this screw all the way in order to get this spline shaft out. Oh, there we go. Right, now I've got the steering rack out. So I don't lose it, of course. I'll put the screw back into the clamp. Now it's just a single nut behind the picture frame each side that holds the metallastic bushes or mounts back onto the steering rack. So I think those have seen better days. You can see the cracking through there. I'm sure replacements are easy to get hold of. But this one's held on with those bolts still, so I think should have been holding the steering rack on. Bush out of the way. So I've done a bit of investigation as to why the steering rack was mounted incorrectly. So it was mounted with 2 bolts one side and 4 the other. So here's the metallastic mount. That's a piece of rubber sandwiched between 2 steel plates. This side mounts to the picture frame, this side is the steering rack. So if I push this on here, that's how it would sit, and then it's got this stud that goes onto the picture frame and then a further 2 bolts that bolt through. And that's where it was confusing, because this is what I got on one side. So you can see this bolt here, it's got this spacer on the shank and a large washer, whereas the other side has no large washer, no spacer, but it does have a couple of nuts in there. If I offer it up, you can see that when that's all clamped up, that spacer is going to create exactly the right distance between this plate on the mount and that plate on the steering rack. So it shows that that's exactly the right way to do it. And there's actually a witness mark for the larger washer here, but most importantly there's a witness mark for the washers the other side, so it shows the other side have been done incorrectly. And of course the implication for that is that if those aren't in place, then it's possible for this bush to flex slightly this way under load, and you're not going to be getting the right both durability or possibly steering feel as well. So definitely something I need to correct. Further evidence in the handbook here shows, if you can see just in here, if it will focus properly, there is a large washer there rather than a hole. So again, that's more evidence that what I've just worked out is correct. I'm now going to disconnect the brake, so of course that means taking the fluid out of the system. This is actually the brake reservoir, which doesn't seem to have much left in it. This is the clutch, so I'm just going to take this bracket off and tip the contents out. Then I'll catch any remaining fluid as I disconnect the pipes on the calipers. With the steering rack disconnected, of course I can swivel the hub round now for better access. Paint tray underneath, 7/16 spanner to disconnect these connections onto the brake caliper. Then going from this link pipe here to the flexi pipe, undo this joint. This can all be replaced later, of course. So the fluid drained, I can now set about removing the lock wire and undoing these bolts that hold the caliper onto the hub carrier. Copper wire is being used here, which isn't ideal, but I guess better than nothing. A 3/4 inch socket and a breaker bar should be enough too. There we go, crack these off. I've just got the brake pads themselves gripping the disc, preventing me from taking this off. Get a crowbar in here and lever it, should come away. Now, what I can hear dropping out there is some of the shims that are used to set the caliper up. So if I set them aside, they're completely reusable and can be cleaned up. Now it's time to disconnect the brake flexi hoses that go between the hub here and this bracket. So one little nut at the bottom to undo here, and I'll be able to take the brake pipe and its bracket off. Definitely time for a bit of a break at this point. Have a bit of a read of the manual. Enjoy my tea. Right, now for what can be a very simple but can also be a very difficult job. Breaking the ball joints on these can be a challenge. I remember years ago, having recently done the top and bottom ball joints on my Mark 10, going to Brown's Lane for work, and next door where Jaguar Classic were then based, I heard someone absolutely giving it everything with the hammer and hitting something. Poked my head through the door and they were trying to split the ball joints on an E-Type. Getting the impact wrench in there isn't going to be possible, so I'm going to have to do this by hand. That ball joint is absolutely knackered. Right, first of all, I'll give this a bit of a friendly tap just to see if I can help break the taper. Right, nothing subtle about this ball joint splitting tool. Okay, brilliant, that's one down. Actually improves my access to this one as well. Just need to be careful because when it lets go, this pin, when it pops out there, the whole lot's going to tip over, so I just need to watch that. There we go, 7/8 socket onto there. See if the breaker will help me first of all. Okay, there it goes. to put something underneath this to stop it all crashing to the ground. But I think I'll put this back in here just to help level it off a bit. That'll hold. And again, another couple of friendly taps. Still not gone. Oh dear. It's amazing that that is just a friction joint in there. So there's a bit of corrosion and a taper, which is tapering upwards, not downwards, and it's holding the splined hub here, the disc, the knuckle. All of that weighs a few kilos, and it's just holding on. There we go. As you can see now, the big tapered joint here on the completely shot bottom ball joint, that's easily replaceable. All of this can be rebuilt and just put in new ball joints, and the transformation will be amazing. Now for the other side. I hope I'm as lucky. Okay, brilliant. Both hubs off. I can separate the discs and everything and the heat shield or the dust shield later. You now get to see kind of classic double wishbone suspension. The bottom one's got a great big torsion spring that runs all the way down there up to the bulkhead. But look at this. This isn't exactly moving very freely. There's a lot of rubber reaction there going on, which would be contributing to the spring rate. I'm sure that ought to pivot just a lot more freely than it is. It feels kind of really stiff and a bit like my joints tend to feel like when I wake up in the morning, but that needs all replacing and freeing off so that it just, you know, the spring needs to do the work, not so much the bushes. To say, I've got a bit of a sweat on after doing all of that, so have a cup of tea and a break for a few minutes. Next I'm going to go after the clutch pipes. So this one attaches to the clutch reservoir. You've got a flexi hose to a solid pipe that then goes into the end of the master cylinder here. You've then got an output that goes, solid pipe that goes around here onto a bracket there that attaches to this flexible one. Then this has got a solid pipe that goes down to the slave cylinder here that's attached beside the gearbox that operates the clutch. This isn't suspended at all, so just undoing this 1/2 inch joint onto the master cylinder, we'll get this first bit out. Now for the connection that goes all the way around to the slave cylinder. 7/16 joint on this one. Next connected, there's a tab that comes off the hose and attaches underneath the wiper motor here. So I don't think I'll be able to get a socket in there. In fact, that looks pretty tricky. So maybe I need to get some of these other hoses out of the way first. I think I'll take these two here as a part of the vacuum system for the brakes. This one-way valve in the vacuum system sits on top of the reservac tank, so that's a reserve of vacuum that's taken from the inlet manifold. So just get in here with this long screwdriver and try and undo this. Quickly put these back together again before I forget what goes where. Now I can get a ring spanner into this screw head here that's holding the tab, holding this clutch line here in place. So this is into the driver's footwell. So up here there are two nuts. It's this one here that the clutch pipe is being clamped in by. The frame actually attaches onto the bulkhead here as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4 nuts there. This is the one that I need to hold steady while I undo that little tab that's holding the clutch pipe on. See if I can get this to stay and hold in place while I try and undo it from the other side. Got it going the other side. Well, that didn't last very long. Right, with that spanner having done the work for me there, move that out of the way. Now it's just this connection that's on this little L bracket that's mounted again onto the frame here. Right, now to undo this side of it that goes down to the slave cylinder. So I can now lift away the slave cylinder. Before I can remove the clutch master cylinder here, I need to disconnect a pin which has just got a split pin holding it in place. And I need to go in from the footwell to disconnect that from the clutch pedal itself. I can see the connection, but this is where I'm a bit big for this really. Oh dear. Right, where's the pin? Oh, brilliant. That's out. All that to get this little sucker out, so all I need to do was pull that pin out with the pliers. And now I should be able to withdraw the master cylinder pretty easily. Okay, 2 1/2-inch nuts. And this should be out. There we go. One clutch master cylinder. Looks in pretty good condition actually, so it looks like that's been replaced fairly recently. And then a spacer block that spaces it off the pedal box here. Right, so I'll now reassemble everything before putting it away. So this was the one from the reservoir. That goes into the end of the master cylinder. And I've got the first bit of pipe that goes around the bulkhead, connecting up to the slave cylinder. And then I've got this one that joins on to go down to the slave cylinder. It doesn't need to be together strongly, it's just enough to be a reference for later. But of course I put the pin back in that goes onto the pedal as well. So it's all a mess, but at least it's together. I'm about halfway into stripping out the engine bay. Now, as you can see, all of these parts need work doing to them in terms of either restoring, refurbishing, replating, repainting, the works, all completely replacing of course. Please join me next time and I'll be completing the strip down of the engine bay. Thank you for watching.